my way to England as well as I could. This was a heavy piece of news to my nephew, but there was no way to help it but to comply; so in short, he went on board the ship again, and satisfied the men that his uncle had yielded to their importunity, and had sent for his goods from on board the ship; so that the matter was over in a few hours, the men returned to their duty, and I began to consider what course I should steer. I was now alone in a most remote part of the world, for I was near 3000 leagues by sea farther off from England than I was at my island; only, it is true, I might travel here by land over the Great Mogul's country to Surat, might go from thence to Bassora by sea, up the Gulf of Persia, and take the way of the caravans, over the desert of Arabia, to Aleppo and Scanderoon, from thence by sea again to Italy, and so overland into France. I had another way before me, which was to wait for some English ships, which were coming to Bengal from Acheen, on the island of Sumatra, and get passage on board them from England. But as I came hither without any concern of the East Indian Company, so it would be difficult to go from hence without their licence, unless with great favour of the captains of the ships, or the company's factors; and to both I was an utter stranger. Here I had the mortification to see the ship set sail without me. However, my nephew left me 2 servants, or rather 1 companion and 1 servant; the first was clerk to the purser, whom he engaged to go with me, and the other was his own servant. I then took a good lodging in the house of an Englishwoman, where several merchants lodged, some French, 2 Italians, or rather Jews, and 1 Englishman. Here I stayed above 9 months, considering what course to take. I had some English goods with me of value, and a considerable sum of money, my nephew furnishing me with 1000 pieces of 8, and a letter of credit for more if I had occasion, that I might not be straitened, whatever might happen. I quickly disposed of my goods to advantage, and, as I originally intended, I bought here some very good diamonds, which, of all other things, were the most proper for me in my present circumstances, because I could always carry my whole estate about me. During my stay here many proposals were made for my return to England, but none falling out to my mind, the English merchant who lodged with me, and whom I had contracted an intimate acquaintance with, came to me one morning saying, "Countryman, I have a project to communicate, which, as it suits with my thoughts, may, for aught I know, suit with yours also, when you shall have thoroughly considered it. Here we are posted, you by accident and I by my own choice, in a part of the world very remote from our own country, but it is in a country where, by us who understand trade and business, a great deal of money is to be got. If you will put £1000 to my £1000, we will hire a ship here, the first we can get to our minds. You shall be captain, I'll be merchant, and we'll go a trading voyage to China; for what should we stand still for? The whole world is in motion, why should we be idle?" I liked this proposal very well, and the more so because it seemed to be expressed with so much goodwill. In my loose unhinged circumstances, I was the fitter to embrace a proposal for trade, or indeed anything else. I might perhaps say with some truth, that if trade was not my element, rambling was; and no proposal for seeing any part of the world which I had never seen before could possibly come amiss to me. It was, however, some time before we could get a ship to our minds, and when we had got a vessel, it was not easy to get English sailors; that is to say, so many as were necessary to govern the voyage, and manage the sailors which we should pick up there. After some time we got a mate, a boatswain, and a gunner, English, a Dutch carpenter, and 3 foremast men. With these we found we could do well enough, having Indian seamen, such as they were, to make up. When all was ready we set sail for Acheen, in the island of Sumatra, and from thence to Siam, where we exchanged some of our wares for opium and some arrack; the first a commodity which bears a great price among the Chinese, and which at that time was much wanted there. Then we went up to Sascan, where 8 months out, and on our return to Bengal I was very well satisfied with my adventure. Our people in England often admire how officers, which the company send into India, and the merchants which generally stay there, get such very great estates as they do, and sometimes come home worth £60,000 or £70,000 at a time. But it is little matter for wonder, when we consider the innumerable ports and places where they have a free commerce. Indeed, at the ports where the English ships come, there is such great and constant demands for the growth of all other countries, that there is a certain vent for returns, as well as a market abroad for the goods carried out. I got so much money by my first adventure, and such an insight into the method of getting more, that had I been 20 years younger, I should have been tempted to have stayed here, and sought no farther for making my fortune; but what was all this to a man upwards of 60, that was rich enough, and came abroad more in obedience to a restless desire of seeing the world than a covetous desire of gaining by it? A restless desire it really was; for when I was at home I was restless to go abroad, and when I was abroad I was restless to be at home. I say, what was this gain to me? I was rich enough already, nor had I any uneasy desires of getting more money; therefore the profit of the voyage to me was of no great force for the prompting me forward to further undertakings. Hence I thought that by this voyage I had made no progress at all, because I was come back, as I might call it, to the place from whence I came, as to a home; whereas my eye, like that which Solomon speaks of, was never satisfied with seeing. I was come into a part of the world which I was never in before, and that part, in particular, which I heard much of, and was resolved to see as much of it as I could; and then I thought I might say I had seen all the world that was worth seeing. But my fellow traveller and I had different notions. I acknowledge his were the more suited to the end of a merchant's life, who, when he is abroad upon adventures, is wise to stick to that, as the best thing for him, which he is likely to get the most money by. On the other hand, mine was the notion of a mad, rambling boy, that never cares to see a thing twice over. But this was not all. I had a kind of impatience upon me to be nearer home, and yet an unsettled resolution which way to go. In the interval of these consultations my friend, who was always upon the search for business, proposed another voyage among the Spice Islands, to bring home a loading of cloves from the Manillas, or thereabouts. We were not long in preparing for this voyage; the chief difficulty was in bringing me to come into it. However, at last, nothing else offering, and as sitting still, to me especially, was the unhappiest part of life, I resolved on this voyage too, which we made very successfully, touching at Borneo and several other islands, and came home in about 5 months, when we sold our spices, with very great profit, to the Persian merchants, who carried them away to the Gulf. My friend, when we made up this account, smiled at me. "Well now," said he, with a sort of friendly rebuke on my indolent temper, "is not this better than walking about here, like a man with nothing to do, and spending our time in staring at the nonsense and ignorance of the pagans?" "Why, truly," said I, "my friend, I think it is, and I begin to be a convert to the principles of merchandising; but I must tell you, by the way, you do not know what I am doing; for if I once conquer my backwardness, and embark heartily, old as I am, I shall harass you up and down the world till I tire you; for I shall pursue it so eagerly, I shall never let you lie still." CHAPTER 11.